Hello and welcome to the K-Zone Baseball Development Podcast. Today we're sitting down with the head coach of the Toledo Rockets, Rob Reinstetle. I'm Hunter Wood. I'm here with the founder of K-Zone Baseball Development, Jimi Keating.
So you want your son to go D1. We got a head coach on today. Start taking some notes. Before we get going here, if you want more insight on chasing this journey and you want guys like me and Hunter in your corner, we are really excited to be building an online community where we try to help players and families do this thing without getting hurt, without wasting tens of thousands of dollars. And you can join that online community. It's called the K-Zone Baseball Development Dugout. You can go over to kzonebaseballdevelopment.com/dugout. Use the code WORK. You can get that first month for free. If you don't like it after that, cancel it. Tell us to kick rocks. Let's dive in.
All right, Rob Reinstetle is the head coach of the Toledo Rockets. Throughout his coaching career, he's coached at the nation's premier baseball program, served as a professional scout with the Dodgers. He's helped develop over 80 MLB draft picks and numerous major league players. Most recently, he has led Toledo's resurgence as one of the top programs in the MAC. He has been just one win shy of the NCAA tournament these last 2 years. We know this is going to provide a lot of insight for families, coaches, and players, so we're excited to get to it. Coach Reinstetle, how are you?
I'm doing well. Obviously the transfer portal's been open for about 2 or 3 days, so we're deep in the middle of that, looking at players and trying to recruit and finish out our roster, so to speak.
Well, hopefully you don't miss signing a guy because you're yapping with us, but we appreciate your time, sir.
That's why you have assistants. They're out there working hard.
So let's launch into this first question, Coach. When you arrived at Toledo, you inherited a program that was just trying to find its footing. Fast forward to today, and once again, you've been one win away from the NCAA tournament and normally a 1 or 2 bid league, which is really, really awesome. You've done that back-to-back seasons. So when you're trying to turn a program around, what are the first things that you had to change? What did you focus on when building this winning culture there at Toledo?
Yeah, so, when I got here, they had just come off finishing dead last in the MAC. I mean, I think they won 4 conference games the year before I arrived, and it was pretty evident when I got here that a couple things had to change quickly, and one of them was the culture. There really wasn't much of a culture here for winning baseball. It was more or less, hey, we're just kind of happy to be Division I and have uniforms and get to go play. Not really striving to be excellent or elite. And, you mentioned some of the schools I've been at. I've been at some really good places. And when you coach at places like that, you get used to, a lot of different things. One of those is winning and winning at a high level and what that takes. And luckily, I was the recruiting coordinator at most of those spots. So I was on the front lines building some of those really good teams that I used to coach. And so when we got here, it was pretty much we 2 things. We have to elevate and recruit better players, and then we have to build a culture that is surrounded and just all about excellence and success. And so those are the 2 things we had to hit the ground running. Personally, I'll be honest, I thought it would take me a year or 2. I thought it was going to be an easy process. Just come in, zip, and we're done. It's taken a while. I mean, it is a really tough animal to change the culture of a place that has not had success. And so we've done it brick by brick, year after year. And you can see that every year we get a little bit better. And that's because we're recruiting a little bit better of a player. We're learning what works, and then we're building that culture. And that's for me, that's my biggest job as the head coach, is kind of that team building and culture aspect. I have good assistant coaches. I let them coach. I don't really, I'm a hitting guy. That, Hunter. I mean, I'm a hitting guy, but I don't really get too super involved in that. I'm the program overseer. I have to be at the pitching bullpens. I run the infield defense. I have to be around the hitters. So I'm floating all around practice. So I let my coaches coach. My job is to make sure I meld all these guys and build a good team with a good culture.
That's awesome. And you being a hitting guy, I want to call out some of the success that you guys have had on the mound over the last couple of years. Your guys are shoving. So I think the format, especially for young assistants coaching in the game, of being able to be under a head coach that trusts you to run it, but he knows what's going on, it's building a culture that's awesome, because you know that if you have a ton of success as an assistant coach at the small level, then you're probably going to have yourself a new assistant here in a minute, and that guy's going to move on. And if you have no idea what they were just doing for the last few years pitching-wise, it's like, oh, wow, all our success just went out the door. But the head coach is floating around and is in everything and knows what's going on. That's ideal, man. And that's what builds the sustaining long term success that you seem to be right in the middle of building right now.
Yeah, at my level, which would be classified, I guess, as mid-major baseball. You're exactly right. You're going to have good assistants, and they're going to get noticed because they do a good job. And of course, better pay, bigger leagues, whatever. And so you do lose your assistants. And like I said, when I got here, I took a CEO type mentality to the way I run the program, and I am involved in all phases. And luckily, across my coaching career, it's great because I've done everything. I've done laundry. I've drug a baseball field. I've had to order food and hotel rooms and do travel. So I've really done everything in my career. So as I sit here, I can help these guys do their jobs, but I can also tell them like, I'm not asking you to do anything I've never done myself. And that's kind of a big piece of helping these guys navigate what they do. But you're right. If I'm not involved in all aspects and know what works, then it doesn't work here, right? And so when I lose a pitching coach to another school or the pro ranks or whatever it is, I know what he was doing that works, and I know what we can do to make it better. So it helps me hire the next guy and understand exactly what we're looking at. And I feel really good that every time I've made a hire, I've actually hired a better coach. I've hired a better pitching coach, a better hitting coach. And that's how you kind of morph your team and keep things moving in a good, positive direction.
And we're appealing to a wide audience here. High school baseball players, they'll listen to this. Parents listen to this. Baseball fans listen to this. I want to stress to everyone at home, winning is so hard. And I have been on the end of a 17-win season. And I rode the same bus as Coach Reinstetle when we were there. And listen, love the people, love the coaches, love the university, love all those things. But it's tough when you're just not winning. Winning is so hard and so difficult. And I want everyone to hear this, parents, players, that you may not even know what the MAC is. It's awesome baseball. It's a whole lot of fun, and it's tough to win there. We're right here in Louisville, Kentucky, and there's programs that are 2 or 3 hours away from us that some of these high school guys have never heard of before, but they dominate their leagues. Right states right up the road, and just a tradition of excellence. And what I see right now in the MAC is really cool. I'm seeing Toledo emerge as one of those programs. They're going to be in the hunt every year. You guys are breaking Kent State's back at seemingly every year now. So it's really, really cool to hear you talk about you taking that CEO approach and letting people do their jobs, which is wonderful and awesome. And I want to give you a compliment here, Coach. Of course, you were with us. You were my hitting coach in college, and that's why we have such a strong connection. I was watching you guys play Jacksonville State earlier in the year, and I texted you after the game. Yeah. Jacksonville State's good.
They're really good.
They had a really good year. And, your guys were in there. They were battling, but they ran into a buzzsaw on Friday night. And I remember a guy takes a questionable strike 3 call, and you're on the top step, and you're not throwing your hands up, saying, right. Why'd you take that pitch? It was get him next time. Hey, you're fine. Stay in this thing. I mean, positivity was overflowing. So I just want to give you a compliment there. That's a guy that's fun to play for. That's a guy that has your back. And that's what I'm hearing is coming out of the Toledo Rockets right now. So I want to give you your flowers there, Coach.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's a learned trait, as an assistant, you get a little more fiery. Sometimes that you played under me, but even as a young head coach, I was a little more aggressive, so to speak. And then you kind of learn that it's 2 things. The kid that we're coaching today is a lot different than the kid I coached 10, 15 years ago. And so you as a coach, if you don't kind of morph and if you don't grow in that regard, you're not going to be able to connect to the players that you have in today's age of baseball. And a lot of times it is that positive reinforcement and letting them know. I mean, I can't sit there every day as part of our culture and the way we coach and say, hey, baseball is a game of failure, right? If you're successful 3 out of 10 times, you're a really good hitter. You can't tell them that and then get on their rear ends every single time that they make an out or make a bad swing decision or whatever. It doesn't reinforce what you're saying. And so you have to kind of walk that fine line. And so a lot of times I do take that approach where, okay, you strike out, you have a bad at bat and they come back. We all know this as hitters. You may make out your first 2 or 3 times, but that last at bat of the game may be the one that wins the game. And you got to be in a right mindset to go and do that. So yeah, I think that positivity is something that is part of my growth as a coach over the years, and I'm proud of that. So thank you for saying that.
Absolutely. It was super encouraging. So we've already talked about it. We talked about it before we started recording. We're at a really, it's no longer odd because it's just baseball now, but
Right.
we're in a very interesting climate where some of these, like you said, mid-major, I don't love the term mid-major, but we'll call it what it is, right? Mid-major conference, the MAC, what we're seeing, if you turn on ESPN Plus, you look at an ACC Big Ten lineup, they probably have the best player from the MAC the year before hitting in their 3-hole. So this is really odd dynamic where you're training players, you're giving them the opportunity, and then they're seemingly being poached, and we understand the dynamic of the game. But
Right.
I want you to talk about the MAC a little bit. So we're in Louisville, and I want this conference to get the credit it deserves as the awesome baseball conference, the wonderful place to play baseball. Talk about why this, what we would consider a mid-major conference. Tell us why it's so much more than that, and why you have just as good of a chance to reach your dreams in the game of baseball playing for Akron or playing for Bowling Green State or playing for Toledo, as you know, because so many guys in high school, they get their mindset on University of Kentucky or University of Tennessee, and in college, you know, listen, if I always tell people, if you play any college sport for 4 years, I will shake your hand and say you did an amazing feat. So talk about that a little bit, Coach.
Yeah, so you bring up a lot of really good points. I'll start with the MAC in general. So the MAC is a very good baseball conference, and that's one thing we have to, in the recruiting process, explain to people what the MAC really is. We are dab smack in the middle and in the shadows of the Big Ten footprint. And the Big Ten gets a lot of notoriety as a quote unquote P4 conference. And they're a P4 conference because they play really high level football. I'm not going to tell you that the Big Ten or, in baseball is a super powerful conference, especially when you take UCLA and USC and Oregon and all, Washington, you take the Pac-12 teams that are now in and out of it. The old Big Ten format, we're in the shadows of that as the MAC. And there's been years, and this is like public knowledge. There's been years when the MAC has had more draft picks than the Big Ten. The MAC has had more first rounders in like the last 10 years than the Big Ten has. So it is a very good baseball conference. I will tell you, it's kind of top heavy. There's 4 or 5 teams in our league that are really good every year in and out, right? And then there's some teams that'll pop in every once in a while and have a good year. And then there's those teams that are kind of at the bottom. And so it is a top heavy league, but really the way it is now, you got to get through Miami of Ohio, Kent State, Ball State, Toledo. Those are to me, the 4 main teams in this league that have sustained success, right? And it's hard. It's hard to do that with what you're talking about and how the transfer portal is. So, recruiting has changed dramatically, and you're right. Players get quote unquote poached now. We try to fend that off the best that we can, but there's a lot of money now circling through the higher levels of college baseball, and so that's one thing we as mid-majors have to fight is I don't have NIL. I don't have rev share. I have scholarship dollars. But when you're talking about a kid that has a potential to go to an SEC, ACC, Big 12 school, they have a little more resources that can attract that kid. Where I think the competitive balance comes in, and what I talk about all the time is that, okay, so you turn on the TV and you're looking at, Tennessee or LSU or whoever you want to say, right? You look at them and like you mentioned, their 3-hole hitter may have been at Toledo the year before. He might have been at Ball State or whatever. The kicker is I think that levels the playing field, right? Are they the better players in the MAC or, the OVC or these other leagues, the Horizon, whatever, Missouri Valley? Yeah, they're the better players in that league. But at the end of the day, they're still a MAC player, still a Missouri Valley player. So I think what happens is when you go down and you play some of those teams, you're essentially playing kind of like a mid-major all-star team, which at the end of the day levels the playing field for a Toledo, for a Miami, for a Wright State, some of the schools that you've mentioned. And I think that's why you see Murray State make a run and get into Omaha. I think that's why you see Little Rock and places like that are taking, last year Little Rock took LSU to game 7 of a regional. This year they're in a super regional. So I think it levels the playing field. And because of the way the portal is now, and so many people are focused on recruiting the portal, especially at that P4 level, now all of a sudden those really good high school kids aren't in those programs as more. And now we have a bigger reach to get a better high school player. The junior college kid is the one that's getting really overlooked a lot of times now in the recruiting process because, again, a power four recruiting coordinator and a power four coach, would you rather take kind of a JUCO or a high school kid, or do you want that kid that already has 400 Division I at bats underneath his belt with proven success? That's a pretty obvious one for those guys, and that's where they're sinking a lot of their resources and their money. But what that's done is it's opened up a new kind of stream of player for a mid-major to go grab. Now we're getting a better high school player. We're getting that higher level JUCO kid that comes in and has a lot of success for us and makes us even better on the field ourselves.
It's such a changed environment from when you were coaching Hunter and I was in college at the same time. And you bring up Little Rock there, and we're recording this as Super Regionals are still going. It'll release well after that's all been decided. But
Sure.
there's some information put out about the 16 teams remaining in Supers that I've been teaching to our young guys this week because they say they're chasing a dream. And you talk about the high school guys that are now available to you that, let's be honest, the level of high school guys you are bringing in right now, we all know in the mid-2010s would have been at your teams that are contending directly for national championships every year. But
Correct.
now you're able to get high school guys that are big and physical and top end of their class because some of the bigger programs have moved on from the high school player. And they might pull a kid from the other side of the country that's 98 with 5 pitches for a strike, but the kid they grew up playing ball, 4 high schools away from the stadium might not even get an email answered to, and he's 92, 93, and he's wondering what he did wrong. This information here I think is pretty interesting. It's 16 teams remaining, and it lists their average body weight and velocity of their top 5 arms.
Yeah.
And of the 16 teams remaining, the average pitcher was 210, and the average fastball was 92.
Right.
There are not a lot of high school guys that are 210 and throw 92, and there are
They're
not
not.
enough of them to fill Division I baseball. But there are enough of sophomores, juniors, and seniors that could be 210 and throw 92. So the development component of this thing cannot be overlooked. And a place like Toledo gives you an opportunity as a really good high school player. You got to be really good to go in and be valued a little bit more than being the guy that's, all right, you're fighting the DSA tag or the December 1st portal, and you hit 95 in the pen. That's sweet, but 4 of these guys were conference pitcher of the year wherever they were from last year. That guy was the D2 national pitcher of the year. So
Right.
we'll maybe watch your bullpen, I think, is what's happening some at your bigger schools. So we've kind of got an informal policy that we've established after this year is like we're not letting a guy go to a Power 4 conference unless he's got significant draft buzz, because what we're seeing is just these guys are kicking back in June, and you've got a first-team All-State player who has inter-squad video he's putting on Twitter, and for some of these guys, we know it, they might end up firefighters. Like that portal for many is the graveyard, and we know
Well,
that.
you're right. Yeah, I'll throw a stat at you. They put this out. It was on X the other day. 2025. Okay, the 2025 transfer portal for Division I baseball. Only 61% of the players that entered the portal found a place to play. That means 39% of the guys that went into the portal last summer ended their careers in the transfer portal. And you mentioned a word, development, right? That is a buzzword, and everybody loves to use that word, right? Power 4 schools use it. Oh, look at our pitching labs and all this kind of stuff. At the end of the day, there isn't a lot of development going on at the higher levels, right? Yes, they practice, and you can count that as development. But at the end of the day, if you can't help them, you will be in the transfer portal. That's just plain and simple. If you're a freshman and you're at Kentucky or somewhere in the SEC or whatever, if you can't help them right out of the gate, they don't really have that patience to say, well, he'll be better as a sophomore, or we'll get him as a junior. They don't have that because they know I can put this kid in the portal and I can go find a kid at a mid-major that, like you said, he's the player of the year, he's the conference pitcher of the year, he's 10-1, he's got a 3 ERA. I can go get that guy. Whereas 10 years ago, that freshman that you're talking about that was 92, they had the patience to say, oh, when this kid's a year older and he's in our weight room, he's going to be 94, 95. They don't have that patience anymore. It's a, it's a very transactional world that we live in now with the portal, and there isn't that patience, which is where we come in, right? Here at Toledo, at these some of these programs, right? Murray State and all these places that are having success. Now we're getting that better high school kid, and we can give them a little longer leash. We can understand that, okay, yeah, he's 92. That's pretty good for us. Well, guess what? He's going to be 94. Eventually, that kid will probably matriculate out of our program, because of the money and as we talked about poaching and things like that. But we still get them for 2 or 3 years, and we kind of make them what they are, and that's true development. I mean, we have that here. We've done that. We've shown that. I look at my Friday night guy this year, who was the MAC pitcher of the year, and statistically one of the best pitchers in the country, statistically, right? He came in as a 6'5", 170-pound freshman, throwing 84 to 87. And now you look at him as a senior, he's 6'6", 210 pounds. There's your target number,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now he's 94, and he's throwing an 87-mile-an-hour slider, and he's got a cutter and sink and all this kind of stuff. He spent 4 years in my program. And you can look at each year, 10 innings as a freshman. Then it went to 17. Then it goes to, 40. And this year, like 70. So there's development, right? And that's a great example of it. And we have a bunch of those in our program. But the development piece, I mean, just because you get to throw, 8,000 bullpens in a performance lab that all these people have, that really in development. They're just telling you kind of what you're doing, what your stuff is. But development's being on the field and having success. That's the biggest developer is playing time.
Man, and I probably shouldn't say this as somebody that trains all of our pitchers and we run a development business. All of the technology is mainly marketing. It is what's going on in our game. Look at my lab that we have. Most of the time is a recruiting tool to get the best guy. And in the baseball training space, like your 14-year-old does not need my Rapsodo. Like we don't need that at all.
But you're right, though. That stuff is
fork.
important, though. It's
Right.
important, right? Like we have all that. We have
Yeah.
TrackMan, Rapsodo, all the gadgets and gadgets. We have it all here as well. I guess I think that stuff is more of a training tool than it is anything else. It just kind of tells you where you're at and what happens. And I guess my point would be if you're training a kid on all your pitching lab stuff, right? At all your metrics, they're telling you, man, this kid's got a great slider. It's awesome, right? It's got the right and vertical breaks and spin and all that. You know that it's a good slider. I'm a believer though that you don't know it's a good slider until you throw it to a hitter and you see what it does, right? You throw the TrackMan tells you that's a beautiful slider. Well, what happens when you get into a game and you throw that beautiful slider and that hitter hits it 400 feet to dead center field? Was it really a good slider? TrackMan said it was. So that's where like the human element and the development piece comes in. TrackMan says it's beautiful, but maybe we need to, make sure that we throw it in the right spot. Maybe we need to change the angle a little bit. There's a lot of things that go into it. So I'm a big believer in technology. I think technology is awesome and we use it a lot, but it's just a tool. It's not the end all be all. And I think that in the recruiting process, what you're doing with your guys, you just mentioned it, I think it's awesome, right? Like you're giving them metrics, which we look at. Like we look at those metrics to understand, yeah, he does have the right shape of a slider, or he has the right shape, a fat ride fastball, whatever it may be. That's good to know. But then we have to really dive in to see, can the kid pitch? Can he
Right.
compete? Can he throw strikes? Can he get hitters out with the stuff that he says he has?
And I think you're the third or fourth coach we've had in a row that we've ended up basically on this same conversation of all this information at the higher levels of the game is awesome and it's very, very important. But as it trickles down, we've got many middle school parents that are worried about what their son is popping on a pocket radar or what his spin rate is on his two seam. And he threw it 72 though. Like that's the thing. And he's walking the house. So I think where you're doing so much right is the opportunity to play the game in the college level. And you can have whatever you want on the TrackMan or Rapsodo, but get on X right now. So many of these guys that went to places that they were a reach to go there have just went a year without playing baseball. And even the schools that they think are smaller schools they can fall back on are a little bit done with the player that didn't lay down any numbers, and they don't really know why he's in the portal, and they kind of just don't care that much anymore. And that guy, I mean, you shared 39% of the guys that were D1 last year that went in the portal did not play baseball again. That's a
Right.
that's a really devastating amount of guys that have likely been misled as to what the goal was when they finished high school and that recruiting journey. It's not about the commitment; it's about the development. Where are you actually going to go and play?
Right.
Give me
You
the.
know,
Go ahead, Coach.
no, go, no, good. You ask your question. I'm sorry.
I thought it was a good segue here, where I think you've answered some of these things. So you're in your office right now. I would assume, when you have a player on campus, them and their family will likely end up there at some time. I sat in similar offices, and it was the head coach and the final sales pitch with the offer coming.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a scenario here, and I want you to give me the sales pitch. Okay, you've got a player. Let's say he's from Indiana,
Okay.
and he has a preferred walk-on from a Big Ten school.
Yep.
He has a top 20 JUCO offer, and the Toledo Rockets want him on campus. Give me the sales pitch. Convince this high school player why he should come and develop for the Toledo Rockets.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll start with the P4 offer. I would basically try to explain to them that, okay, you have a preferred walk-on spot at a P4. That's great. You can point to all of the cases of kids that aren't playing there, right? Who aren't getting their opportunities and end up in the transfer portal. And there's a plethora of those. And like we had a kid here, and I always try to use examples because examples hit home. We had a kid here 2 years ago that we got out of the transfer portal from Virginia Tech. And in 3 years, now granted, he was 6'4", 230 pounds, left-handed, and was like 92, 94. In 3 years at Virginia Tech, he threw a total of 33 and a third innings. And he goes into the portal. We end up getting him. He shows up here. He's my Friday night guy. He throws 70 innings, leads the MAC in ERA, and is now in professional baseball with the White Sox. And last year, his first year of pro ball, that kid broke the White Sox single season strikeout record in his first year of pro ball, right? But for 3 years, he toiled away, at Virginia Tech, thinking he was going to get on the mound. And you hear those horror stories of, well, I pitched really well in the fall. I had one bad outing in the spring and I never saw the field again. And so we use that a lot, right? We use those examples of, again, it goes back to, well, you have a chance to pitch here. You have a chance to throw significant, impactful innings for us, or you can go sit for a year and waste a year of development, waste a year of chance to be on a field. And nobody wants to go sit. I mean, I think if you really ask a kid, you want to go sit and not play? The answer is going to be no. Then why are you going there? You're going there because of the name of the school, because of the stadium, because of the conference, because of the prestige to walk around and tell, well, I'm going to Purdue, I'm going to Indiana, whatever the case may be, right? So that's how we would tackle that P4 kid. The JUCO thing is different. There's a lot of really good junior college baseball out there, and we recruit a lot of junior college players. What I would tell a kid that has a junior college offer is that it is a different animal, right? You're not going to have the college experience. There isn't football, on a Saturday. There's not a campus environment where you can go to college basketball. It's a different lifestyle, right? And then I would point out that a lot of the junior colleges don't necessarily have the same, I guess, technology and training, so to speak. Now we're getting more back into kind of the things you're talking about that we try to battle with P4. I use that against the JUCOs, right? A lot of times you go to a JUCO and what is it? It's 65 players. That's a lot of reps that you're not going to get because it's 65 guys that you're competing with because they need numbers in order to satisfy their rosters and their enrollments and all that kind of stuff. So, again, we use that. If you're good enough to go play at a really good junior college, why wouldn't you come here and have an opportunity to play right away and be in a Division I program, And so those are kind of I guess, the different avenues that we take depending on what we're up against. And, we need to kind of know that going in of, where this kid's looking and what he's trying to accomplish. I think the thing that parents and recruits nowadays are missing out on is that Division I baseball has a roster cap. I mean, it is 34. These spots at Division I level, regardless if it's Toledo, Kentucky, LSU, whatever, they're like gold. I mean, they're coveted. They're like gold. And so if you have a chance to play at that level, you probably need to look really hard and take it. Now, a lot goes into that, financial stuff, all that plays into it. But to get an opportunity like that is great. And I think Hunter made a great point at the very beginning. If you can find somebody that plays any level of college sports for 4 years, that's like a big deal. I mean, that's like an awesome thing to do. So I think a lot of times you got to take out, you know, the level and find a place that you can go play and be successful. And with the way the world is right now, if you go to a D2 and you're really good, you're probably going to level up in a year or two anyway, right? If you go to a JUCO, you're probably going to, and you do well, you're going to level up and you're going to get to D1 or whatever it is. If you play really well at Toledo, you got a chance to probably quote unquote level up and go play at a P4. But you got to get in, you got to get in somewhere and start putting up stats and start playing. That's the biggest thing. Play the game. That's how you get better. And that's how you get upward mobility.
We've really changed the way that we see it. We now basically tell guys there's two groups of people after high school. There are people that are in college baseball and people that are not. And it's now all pretty much become the same thing. When we were doing this process, and it feels like it's heavier for the high school guy now, but it really shouldn't be if you think about it, because you can redo recruiting every year if you ended up at the wrong spot. And in so many cases, I can think of plenty of guys when we were playing that a guy commits D1 and all the high school kids are always like, well, how's that guy D1 and not me? And
Right.
I now tell everybody, like, why are you worried about that? Like, that kid's going to get cut in a year if he's not good enough to be there, or you're wrong and he'll go develop and it'll be awesome. Why do you care? But when we were playing, like, you could commit to a D1 and just end up like the worst guy on the team for 3 or 4 years and never play at all. And maybe you're the dugout personality or whatever. But you end up with so many circumstances where I think high school players and families misunderstand how small the margin between the levels are.
Mhm.
And I'm talking
Yeah.
all levels.
Yeah.
I talk about it all the time. Like, I've seen 95 plus in Division III baseball before. And turn on the JUCO World Series, man. There's some dogs in there. And you talk about your guy from Virginia Tech, like, he was good enough to pitch there. Like,
Sure.
so
1000%.
we don't know the circumstances or why he did or why he didn't. He was good enough to pitch there. Like, if he's in Double A with the White Sox and he's shoving, he can pitch in college baseball. I promise.
Sure.
So there's just so many different things that go into what is the actual best circumstance for you. And I think a lot of this dials back to families and players are looking at colleges as if they're travel ball programs. And it's not travel ball. It is a college. You're going to live there. You're going to eat your meals there. You're going to talk to these people all the time. So if you didn't have great interactions with the coach and you don't trust him, don't go there, because this man's going to be fully in charge of your life for at least 1 year. So finding the right fit is so much more than what do they got at my position, which is pretty much the only question that I think guys are prepared to ask when they're thinking about recruiting. But it is so much more than that. Do they play guys as freshmen? What do they actually do to develop guys? Are they putting all their dudes in the portal if they're not, an impact all-conference guy as a freshman and replacing them? There's so much that goes into this, and we're hopefully getting enough insight from you that somebody could hear this and be like, you know what? I could see myself at Toledo.
And we point that out. Like, everything you just said is awesome. And we point that out, right? Like, if you look at Toledo, it's pretty easy for us to say, oh, well, 2024, we had a freshman All-American. The last 2 years, we've had the freshman MAC pitcher of the year on our roster. There's been years where I've had 3 or 4 freshmen in my lineup. Like, we can go and prove that, hey, we play freshmen. I can go down and point on my stat sheet, freshman, freshman pitcher, whatever. And we can point that out, right? And there's other schools that you can go look at. And if the kids really do their homework, they can figure out pretty quick who recruits freshmen, who plays freshmen, and has success doing that. And it's easy to figure that out if you put a little time into it. You just got to do that, and that a lot of people don't. They just, again, they get caught up in a conference, they get caught up in a logo, they get caught up in a stadium or whatever. I always tell guys, you're not sitting in the stadium, so who gives a crap? Sorry, pardon my language. Who cares if it's got 6,000 seats? You're not sitting in it. It doesn't matter. You need to know, can I play here? Do they have the stuff that's going to develop me? Do they have the facilities that are going to develop me? Who cares about a stadium, right? But kids do. They care about that and the logos and conference insignias and all that. Again, we point out to kids all the time, like, look at who has played here. Like, we do play freshmen. we've actually built this program on the backs of freshmen. We use the portal in a totally different way than a lot of schools do. And we point that out. We look at, okay, look at this school. Every year they're shuffling 20 kids into the portal to bring in 20 kids. They're recruiting a new team every single year out of the transfer portal. We look at it as like we're going to go get a bunch of good freshmen, and then we will fill our holes based on draft or whatever it is with the portal or a JUCO kid. But I'm not looking to build my roster from the transfer portal. I use it as a tool to plug holes. And there's a lot of coaches that do that, but there's a lot out there that are now like, ooh, I can flip my roster. We weren't very good this year. I can get really good next year. It's dangerous though, because you can get the wrong batch, get the wrong culture kid, and all of a sudden, you look up and you're not very good. You had a good player, but you had the wrong kid, and you get too many of those. So it can go both ways. I've seen teams get really good in the portal in a year. I've seen teams go really backwards in a year because they got the wrong guy. And so there's a lot that goes into all this stuff.
I'm ready to commit, Coach. If you've got the offer on the table, I
Take a
don't have
switch
any
hitting
eligibility.
catcher. I love switch hitting catchers.
Well, good. So you've recruited hundreds of players, probably thousands of players. We probably
Thousands.
undershot that there. Yeah, over the course of 15, 20 years in college baseball. So you've talked about getting the right kid. So what are you evaluating now? You can do pitcher, you can do hitter, you can do player as a whole. What are you evaluating? What makes you say that's a Toledo Rocket? And what makes you send the text to your assistants going, we need this kid on campus next week? What are the things you're looking for?
Well, back to what we talked about at the beginning, those metrics are pretty important. Like that's what gets you at least noticed, right? Like, okay, he's got the metrics. He's got like we here at Toledo, we have a type for our pitching staff. Like if you look, pretty much every guy on my roster is 6'4" and taller. I love big, tall, big bodied guys that we feel have more of an upside to develop as we're talking about, right? Not that we won't take a 6 foot right hander or something like that. But a lot of times those guys are maxed out. I mean, he's 6 foot, he's throwing at 90, 92. You don't really see a lot of growth that he's going to all of a sudden be 94, 96, right? But a 6'6", 6'7" kid that you can add weight to and strength, and he's going to learn his body's going to move. Like those type of things we can really develop and work with. So, the first thing we look at is the metrics. And then honestly, what we've kind of started doing here is we look at the guys that we've had that have had success, the type of player he was. If he's a hitter, what made him a successful hitter in our system at our university, right? And then we try to find something that is similar to that because we know what works. Well, this guy, we know what his profile was. We know what he looked like in high school. We know how his development curve was. Okay, so now we find that next kid that is very similar to that. So it starts off with the metrics and the bodies and just the way they move and things like that. And then as you start building those relationships and making those phone calls, then you start to figure out, from summer coaches, from high school coaches, travel ball guys, the kid himself, what type of person is he? Is he a competitor? Is he tough? Like everybody uses that word. Is he tough? Well, there's ways to figure out if a kid is tough. A lot of times you got to go watch them play. You can see how they react to negative situations in the course of a game, which there's thousands of them. In one summer ball game, there's a ton of negative situations. How do they react? And then I'll be honest with you. I also look at how the parents react, right? Like a kid's parents can absolutely get him off of a list pretty quick by the way they conduct themselves at a summer ball game, right? If they're screaming at the umpire, they're yelling at their kid, whatever. Trust me, us coaches take notice of that. Like we don't want to have to deal with the parent that is a little over the top, And so we kind of look at everything, and that's how you form your total kind of opinion of a player and what you're looking for. It starts with metrics, it goes to their bodies, and then you start diving into what the person is like, what the kid is like. And you only get that if you talk to them through the recruiting process to figure out what makes them tick, and there's certain things that we ask, and a lot of times kids don't know this, but some of our questions are loaded to get a specific answer that we're looking for to see, does this kid fit with what we want and how we do things? And so, I always tell kids in the recruiting process, like recruiting is a game. I mean, and it's hard for parents and kids to understand that recruiting is a game. and it's a game play. I'm 49 going on 50 years old. I've been doing this for 20 plus years. I have a lot of experience in playing the game of recruiting. Whereas an 18-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid, and their parents, they don't have hardly any experience. And so I'm always very honest and open in the recruiting process and let them know that. And I help them, I give them kind of pointers on what to look for. If you got like I was telling, if you got a coach that he texts you all the time, he calls you all the time, but he's never offering you anything, then is he really interested? And at the end of the day, offers and visits speak interest, right? And our job as coaches is very, very simple. Very simple. Our job is to procure good talent. Our job is to sign good players. And it is not a kick the can down the road type game. The analogy I always give in the recruiting process, and moms always laugh at this, is if you're a kid and you're at a beach and you see a really good looking girl, are you going to go and talk to her right now? Or are you going to wait 2 weeks to see if maybe she's back at that same beach at the same time and then you're going to be ready to talk to her? Well, the answer 99.9% of the times, I'm going to go talk to her right now. Well, that's how recruiting is. Like if I see something that I like and I know that it works for me, then why am I going to wait? I'm going to go all in right then and there. I'm not waiting to see what else is down the road in 2 weeks. If I know that I need a shortstop and I got a shortstop I like, I'm going to go after him right now. And that means I'm going to call him, I'm going to text him, I'm going to offer him, I'm going to get him on campus. I'm going to do all those things. I'm not just going to kick the can down the road with a bunch of texts and phone calls. Okay. Do I do that? Yes, I do, because that is the job of recruiting. You always have to continue to call good players. But if you'd be naive as an 18 to 22-year-old kid thinking that, oh, this coach is calling me, but he's not offering me, but he's not offering anybody. No, he's offering somebody. He's just not offering you. He's calling you because when little Jimmy doesn't commit, now he knows he's been talking to you for 2 weeks and he can circle back to you and keep you on the hook, so to speak. And we call those back burner guys. And again, recruiting is a game and people don't understand that. They get really enamored with, oh, I got Kentucky calling me. Well, that's great. Kentucky's not offering you anything. They're just calling you because they know you're a good player, but they're offering somebody that they really want because that's their job, right? And they don't get that kid, well, then you may get circled back to because they've done their job. It's a lot easier at the Power Four level because of the name. You can keep a kid on the hook and you can kick that can down the road a lot longer because of your name, because he's going to always, oh man, Kentucky keeps calling me. They're interested. They're not interested unless they're offering you, unless they want you on campus, unless they're giving you scholarship. That's how you know somebody's really interested. And so I point that out in the recruiting process. I'm probably one of the most blunt and straightforward coaches when I deal with kids because I'm trying to educate them on what is really going on in the process. And you have to learn how to read between the lines really, really well and really, really quick because things happen fast in recruiting.
So many good things there to unpack. I love your analogy there about recruiting being a game, and we often compare it to dating because it is just such a cat and mouse of let me keep you interested but not actually tell you anything, and then every now and then it's like, hey, we're doing this, and you're either in or you're out. Like, let's do it.
Right.
And there is so much of the kind of surface level conversation, and we've even had guys have phone calls with schools that are exciting to say they're having a conversation with, and basically tell them like, man, we really like you. We're excited to see what you do when you come out of JUCO or whatever. And it's like, oh, this kid thought he was getting offered, and they're basically saying like, hey man, please like us in 2 years when you're available and you've laid down numbers. We're not willing to take a risk on a high school player, and those things are happening.
Yeah.
And there's
It's
another
crazy.
thing you said in there.
But it is a game, right? I mean, it's a game, and it's a tough game. It's humbling at times, and you just got to understand how the game is really played and what's really going on. And again, I try to educate people on that. And you guys and what you do, you can be monumental in that, because a lot of times us coaches who were trying to get that kid, we lean on guys like you because we're trying to help. We're trying to get you to help educate the kid on what's really going on. Hey, the school keeps calling you, but they're not offering you anything. This one's right in front of you and they're offering you. There's nothing wrong with that. Like you always, at the end of the day, I don't care what level it is, you go to where you are wanted. And being wanted is scholarship offers, it's roster spots, it's opportunities, it's visits. that is being wanted, not a phone call, not a text. That's just a, hey, you're a good player and we know it and we're going to keep in touch with you. And that's the difference. And the more quickly people can figure that out, the better off they're going to be in the recruiting process.
So you actually just put a term on a thing we've tried to describe to guys for about a year now as we've done this, the back burner thing. We've tried to describe that to so many guys, but you gave us a term for it, so we appreciate that. I think you just dropped a bombshell to so many high school players that's going to actually help them. Like I see this being clipped and used to show guys, hey, this is actually what's happening. Yes, that school looks far more attractive because, as you said, because of all these things. But this is the school that's been with you the earliest, the longest. They've given you the best offer. They want you. You are a value to them.
Right.
So we appreciate you giving that insight. Let's make this more practical. We are trying to do a better job of all the guys we train, all the families we train, not just putting out the podcast, but saying we need you to listen to this because we felt we're putting out good stuff, and there's so many people that need to hear these things. Speak extremely blunt to the high school pitcher and the high school position player. What is the most important thing they can be doing right now to prepare themselves for success at the Division I level?
Oh, that's simple. It's the weight room. I mean, it is the weight room. That is the biggest separator from a freshman that walks into a college program at any level, whether it be D2, D1, Power 4, whatever it is. The weight room is the biggest separator. And so if you can come in and already be physical, then you're going to have a greater chance as a young player to play because we get a lot of kids that are very, very talented, but they're not very strong. And then all of a sudden we have to spend a year or two in the weight room developing them to get them to a point where, that double becomes a home run. That single over the shortstop head is now a backspin line drive in the gap. A lot of that is strength. It's not necessarily the swing. It's not the mechanics. It's strength. And so that to me is the biggest factor for a high school kid, whether you're a pitcher or a position player. If you want to play early in your career at any level of college baseball, you got to get in the weight room and live in there and eat and sleep it and get as strong as you possibly can, because then your curve, when you get there, your learning curve, your development curve at the next level will be a lot shorter, right? I mean, how many kids come in and their fall of their freshman year? And I always tell guys, like, all these high school kids tell me the same thing. Well, I got a personal trainer. I work out, 3-4 times a week with my personal trainer. That is not a Division I weight room. That is not how a Division I weight room operates, right? And so these kids come in as freshmen and they think they've been working really, really hard in the weight room with their personal trainers back home, which are great. I'm not bagging on personal trainers or anything like that. That's awesome. Like, it helps, right? But I always tell them, whatever you're doing, do twice that much, because that's what it's going to take once you get into a Division I weight room. And a lot of times kids come in their freshman year, in that first fall, they get their butts absolutely kicked by the weight room. And you see them just go downhill because their bodies are just absolutely beaten up. Not because we're doing anything really crazy. We're just lifting. We're just lifting at a college level. And then once their bodies acclimate, then you start to see this and they start to rise. But they do this. So the whole point is, in high school, do it so that when you get in, you don't have that big dip. You may have a dip, but it's not a super big one. You just a little dip and then you can go up. And, you played at Western Kentucky. We had Dwayne was one of the best strength coaches I've ever been around. He got after our guys. He pushed them really hard. And that, like, that's different than what kids are doing in high school, And so I would say the weight room. The weight room is a huge developer of talent, and I know, like, Dan McDonald at Louisville is a really good friend of mine. And he will openly say sometimes, I would rather my kids go lift weights than practice baseball, because he knows that weightlifting and strength training and the mobility stuff that they do helps them become better athletes. We've already recruited good players. We've recruited good baseball players with good swings and good fastballs and can do this and that. How do we make them a better athlete that moves better functionally to the sport of baseball? And that's what we spend so much time at. So if you can do that early, it's great. And so the analogy I use all the time in the recruiting process is pretty simple. If you're a high school kid and you want to play college baseball, then when you're in high school, you need to eat sleep, act, train, do everything that a college baseball player does because that's what you want to be. And then when you get to college and you tell me, hey, coach, I want to play professional baseball. Great. That's awesome. Well, guess what? In college, you need to act, sleep, train, and carry and conduct yourself like a professional athlete would because that looks totally different than what a college athlete does. And so if you can have that mindset of, well, I'm in high school, I want to play college. Well, I'm going to act like a college player right now. I'm going to go lift weights and I'm going to go hitting the cages extra instead of going and hanging out with my buddies on a Friday night. That's tough to do as a high school kid. But guess what? Those are the kids that when they get to college are that much further advanced than the other guy. And then in college, it's the same thing. Don't cut corners. You want to play professional baseball? They don't cut corners. They hit if today's a throwing day, they throw. If today's a weightlifting day, they lift. They run. They do what they're supposed to do. And so that's kind of our transgression. You tell me you want to play college baseball, then act like a college player, and that's hard because that's a commitment. But saying it and doing it are two different things. And that's what's the separator for a lot of high school kids to college and college kids to pro, right? I mean, Hunter, you played with guys that played pro ball. I'm sure Jimmy did too. It's like, okay, here we go, like that's what you got to do. You have to act that way. But to answer your question, that was a long-winded answer. It's the weight room. It's the weight room, the weight room, the weight room.
Coach, I love everything you just said. And Hunter's probably excited for whatever I'm about to say because I train our guys on the weight side of things, and I am the personal trainer you're talking about, right? And we have a CSCS that runs some groups for us as well. Shout out Lauren Renfro. But I have pictures of some of our guys from our winter weight training block last year when they were out on winter break. We got a D1 guy, we got a high-end JUCO guy, we got a D3 guy. I've got pictures of all of them. They don't know I have them. That I can't wait to show them when they're home next winter. I've got a guy with puke flying out of his mouth, and we were pushing like a 185 sled.
Right.
And I'm like actually laughing at them. Like, you're all committed at this point. I'm not babying you anymore. I'm going to put you through actually like what a real college lift would be. And I'm like, by the way, guys, I'm out of shape and I don't even really lift that much. And I did this workout before you got here. And I'm fine. And I'm watching guys that are going to go try to chase pro baseball actually lose their breakfast over a workout we put together at 9 a.m. on a 50-degree day. Like, dude, sometimes you're going to do this and then go to practice for 3 hours, and it might be live ABs, and you got to take a 92 or you can't pitch. So you're either going to adapt or you're going to be in the portal, and the weight room determines so much of that. I shared earlier that the 16 teams remaining in college baseball as we record this, the average body weight is 210 and the average fastball is 92. So if you want to be a college player and you're not shooting for 210 and 92, you're probably not going to be one of those guys. And then you even took it a step further than that of the professional level. The average fastball, the last data I saw in the 2026 season was 94.8. Many people can work their entire lives just to throw the fastball as hard as they can and not achieve 94.8. And if you get to 94.8, they still think they need that thing located, they need it running, and they probably need 3 other shapes behind it. Correct. So there are many sports where if you're just born with some gifts, you can succeed. If you're 6'9" and you're pretty decent at hand-eye coordination, you can probably make a living playing basketball somewhere.
Sure.
If you're 6'6" and 325 pounds, we can teach you to push somebody. Baseball is a game that requires obsession, and there's not a level of physical talent that just equals success. We've reached a point where the metrics, yes, we're evaluating the metrics. You guys are looking at metrics. You're basically putting guys in 2 boxes and then making decisions from there. Does he do things powerfully enough to play the level of baseball in the MAC that we have to do? And then you're going to look at those guys and decide, like, okay, he's in the box of powerful enough to play, and he's a good enough player, and he's skilled enough. Because at the end of the day, it's still a skill game. You just have to do it with enough force behind it to actually get to be there. And there's only one way to do that, and it is the weight room. So we're transitioning into the summer as we record this, and I'm asking some of our guys, like, how many times you lifting this week? It's like 3. Okay, wait, are you working full time? Like, what you got going on? No. So you worked out 3 hours out of the 1 week you had, and you say you want to be one of these guys. Well, how often are you in our 3%, our arm care mobility program? We have one that can give you arm care mobility to do legitimately every day of your entire life. And guys are like, yeah, I've got in it a little bit, a couple times this season. like a couple times this season. Like we just talked to Clemson's number one, Aiden Canuck, and he said his off day. Well, it's an off day, but I got my mobility and my arm care, so he considers that nothing. Like he
Right.
considers that just part of who he is as a person. And you say you want to be a collegiate impact player, you say you want to be a pro player, you kind of got to act like that. And acting like that is not thinking that you're working when you
Right.
go take a couple BP rounds or
Well, I
you're
think that
watching YouTube videos.
there's a saying that coaches use, and you guys have heard this before, and I think probably every coach in college baseball has used it at some point. Are you interested or are you committed? And that's the biggest deciding factor on really where you take your career in any sport, to be honest, but especially in baseball. Are you interested in it? Well, that's the guy that lifts 3 times a week and is doing what you're doing. Or are you committed to it, which would be the Clemson, guy that you're talking about. So it's it's that. Are you interested in the sport of baseball and you like it, or are you really committed to it and you've made that decision that I'm going to do what it takes to be elite, to be a high level player? And I guess the one thing that I would tell any high school kid going into college is, and they never understand this until they get there, right? Is when you walk in as a freshman, you're there because you're talented, right? But you're expected to compete against that 22-year-old senior who's 4 years older than you, who's been in the weight room for 4 years, who's been through the wars for 4 years. He's a lot more mature and advanced than you are. But you're a freshman and you want to play, you got to compete with that kid. And then as a coach, I'm looking at that kid and I'm saying, okay, this freshman, not only has he got to compete against my 22-year-old that's a senior, I got to put him on a field to try to get out or try to hit a 22-year-old kid from Kent State who's developed and that much better, right? So again, it goes back to what can I do now to make sure that my curve is a lot smaller once I get to the college level, because you're not competing against the other high school kid. You're competing against a grown man, like a grown man, and that's hard for them to understand until all of a sudden they walk in the door and they look over and the guy's like, "Oh man, he's kind of big." Well, yeah, he is big, and you got to beat him. That's
Coach,
that's the
you spoke to it a tick earlier, and we want to wrap up with this last question here. You talked about how parents can actually potentially negatively impact recruiting, and
yes.
and unfortunately, a couple weeks ago, we saw one of our best players had a family member screaming at an umpire for like 20 straight minutes, and I watched a kid get rung up on a pitch that was like 11 inches off the plate away, and it's like, I think that might have been because of his family yelling at him. So, speak to our families here a little bit. If you could give
Okay.
one piece of advice to the family of a middle school or early high school aged baseball player, what would it be?
Okay. I mean, just support your kid, right? Support what they want, and make sure that, it's in a positive way. Like again, us coaches look at that stuff. Like we figure out pretty quick whose parents are who in the stands, and we don't want to see a parent yell at an umpire for 20 minutes. Not that they're going to show up at a college game and do that, but it's just the overall kind of feel and environment that kid is coming from, where it's like, okay, if this kid has failure, his parents are yelling at him, well, like that's gonna, I have to do like years of counter, I guess terrorism, so to speak, to make sure that we get that out of that kid, and that he understands you're allowed to fail, so I would just say to any parent, like, love and support your kid. If they want to go play baseball, then go to the game and be happy, celebrate their successes, and like kind of back off when they fail, because they already know. Trust me, every player knows when he's had a bad game. The last thing he wants to hear in the car is how bad he played, right? Like, just love them. Tell them that, hey, you struck out 3 times today. Guess what? You get to play again tomorrow. Let's go have a good game tomorrow. And it will go so much further for the kid's psyche and how he conducts himself every single day. I see all these kids, they go to Grand Park, they go to, down there to Lake Point, right? And you get 5 games in 4 days where you're playing with your travel team and you got a really bad day. Well, you don't want to go home and be berated for how bad you play. There was 10 college coaches there, there was 50 college coaches there, and you played like crap. Well, all that does is just make the kid feel even worse. He already knows he played bad. So love him. Tell him like, hey, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. That's why you get to play tomorrow. Tomorrow, just try your best and do the best you can. I mean, that's what we tell our guys. Like, they're not professionals. So I tell them, like, I understand you're going to fail. That's part of the game of baseball, is failure. It's how you learn from that failure and how that you move forward from it that will really determine your success, not only in baseball, but in life. And it's just, it's a big thing for us. And so we do pay attention to that. So like Hunter gave me a compliment at the beginning, like that's how I think parents should be. Like understand that your kid's going to strike out. That's okay. Trust me, as a recruiter, as a head coach, as a college baseball coach, you don't think I realize that kids are going to strike out? Like the best players in the country strike out. The number one player in the country at the Futures game last year struck out. Like that happens. That's part of the game of baseball. And that's why baseball's so awesome. You know, we talked about it earlier. That's why baseball's the one game that anybody can win. Like, I don't care if I'm going up against $1 million payroll SEC roster. I can still win that game if we play the game of baseball the right way, if we play it at a high level. It doesn't matter how much money's on the field, right? In football, it's a different animal. Like, eventually, if Kentucky's playing, Eastern Kentucky, eventually their speed and their strength and just the players they have will overcome it. It may be 0-0 at halftime, but it ain't going to end up that way. They'll eventually overcome it. Baseball's a different animal. I mean, we can beat Vanderbilt. We can beat an SEC team if we play the game the right way. I went on a tangent there, but at the end of the day, I would tell your parents, I would tell any parent, just love your kid and understand that it's a game. They're going to fail, and that's okay. Let them know that's okay. So it doesn't, because the last thing you want is your kid going there, I can't strike out. I can't strike out. I can't strike out, because that's all my dad harped on last night at the dinner table is that I struck out. Well, guess what? He's probably going to strike out because his mindset isn't set in a positive way to have success. It's set in a negative way of, I don't want to do this. And that's, you can't play baseball that way.
Amen. Amen. And by the way, you referenced the football. Hey, the University of Kentucky fears Toledo in football, by the way.
They should.
And Coach Reinstetle, we've had a blast. Awesome episode, awesome insight. We want to thank you for your time. This is Hunter Wood and Jimi Keating, K-Zone Baseball Development. Coach Reinstedtle's been on with us. Thank you so much. Until next time, this is the K-Zone Baseball Development Podcast. Remember that Christ is King, baseball is just a game, and work works.
Thanks, fellas.
Thank you, sir.